Well, hello, everybody. Tonight is Tuesday, May 9th, and this is Dallas Personal Robotics Group regular online gathering, and we'll just go around the table, talk about projects and the like, questions, show and tell, whatever. There is one little housekeeping note that I'll start off with, and that is, I'll put it in chat. Just as a reminder, we have an in-person competition that's coming up Saturday at the Dallas Makerspace. And there are some of the details for that in chat. And we do have provisions for virtual. I haven't kept up with the details, but they're behind that link up there. Okay, so for the queue tonight, we have Ray with something to show, and then I have a kind of a question, and then Kareem, you have maybe something to show, and then open mic. So Ray, what you got?
Oh, I was just doing some testing on get into presentation mode, entire screen. Share. Okay. Let's see which one's which. I think it is this one. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So these, my code and David's code are, more dissimilar than similar. I had like routines to this one actually says move centimeters, but I've changed it now to move millimeters. So the 10 feet is 3,048 millimeters in one direction, and 7 feet I think is, I want to say 2166 millimeters. So I want to try to I had never incorporated odometry like David had, and with this new design, really wanted to give it a try just because it seems like it's the most likely to work without some caveat of being too close to the goal or something like that, and not being able to see either colored cards for blob detection or something like that.
Just going the wrong way.
Huh?
We're going the wrong way.
Or going the wrong way, exactly.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's not going to happen. Anyway, so try to use his, let's see if this is it. Yeah, get coordinate. I don't know how, is that text big enough for you to see it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so these are similar to what he did. He gets what, well, in his case, they were inches. In my case, it's millimeters. So he gets a left millimeter, a right millimeter, and it's just the difference in encoder ticks from one reading to the next reading, whatever. Well, in this case, it's 50 milliseconds. You can get a vector from that and theta, and basically your and I just called it your X and Y Cartesian points. And you can even use it if you have a target to figure out, okay, I'm here, I want to go to here. What is my target distance and my target angle? And one of the questions I had about this in his talk, it's not YD first and XD second, it's XD first and YD second. And I saw those equations there, but in his slides, it's the reverse. Anyway, so in two of the routines, there's another one, rotate to, and I just rotate to an angle in degrees. And so I wanted to try that and see what happened. So if I tell it to rotate 30 degrees, it comes out pretty close. I don't know if you can see that. The theta is actually 29.09. And the X and Y Cartesian points, this is supposed to be a rotation in place, 30 degrees. And it looks like I don't quite do that. So I get like but this is in millimeters. So, Cartesian X is 0.5 millimeter and Cartesian Y is negative 6.4 millimeters. So it's pretty close, not exactly zero, but close. And then if I move, so that was a rotation of 30 degrees. So the theta should have been 30. And then the other thing that I do is the screen is, I can't move that. Okay. Well, hopefully you don't see that. Do you see this stop sharing thing over your screen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
you can click the hide, click stop sharing, hide. Not stop sharing, but click hide.
Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Anyway, so the what was supposed to happen is it was supposed to rotate 30 degrees and then move 100 centimeters. And so instead of moving 100 centimeters or 100 millimeters, sorry, it actually moved 106.8, almost 107. And the target theta is pretty close. I forget what it's supposed to be. 60, I think that's right, or close to it. Anyway, so that's working out now, but my robot does not move. It does not turn or it does not go forward the correct amount. And it's odd that, I've kind of reviewed it several times. It must be in the number of the ticks that I have aren't accurate or something, because it moves a fraction of the angle and a fraction of the distance that I'm asking it to go. So it's like, okay, I can get David's stuff to work, but now my distances are all screwed up. So
hey Ray, go
yeah.
back to your arc tangent calculation.
Oh, here. Yeah, in some of the equations he had on his website, it was like that. And it actually does produce the right result. And I looked at some of the diagram. Well, no, that is backwards still to what he presented.
All right.
Yeah.
You know that if you use x tangent and x tangent 2, those two variables are swapped. And I'm wondering if that's what's going on there.
Yeah, usually the arctan2, the YD is first, at least in the stuff that I've seen.
Yeah, but if you're using it, what I did when I was trying to mess with this is I left in David's, if you're within 0.0001, go this way. Like if you're less than 0.001, you go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Lines that he had because he was using arc tangent.
Yeah.
So I'm like used it, and then I used the arc2 tangent equation.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that if I took the x, what I had x and y in the tangent field and reversed them, then it worked well in the a tangent too.
Yeah. So like I said, it produces the right result, but it was, like if you look at his
well, I don't think he uses a tangent to it hardly at all.
Let's see. No, I got it off his thing. He uses it somewhere. Yeah, I don't know where. I thought I saw it somewhere.
Okay. I want to say that most of his code.
Oh, yeah, here in one of his diagrams.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, X first, Y second in his stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I'm using as well, Ray.
Oh, it is.
But for that matter, I can't get my robot to turn around correctly, so I might have it wrong.
Oh, okay.
So Pat, just flip them. Put the Y first and the X second.
Yeah.
And see if it changes your results. I'm just saying is that I know that, and it, you know, he could easily have made a mistake here.
Yeah. This diagram though, I think is correct. I think if this angle here is arctan 2, this X is actually this, so it's still the opposite, and the Y is the adjacent. It's just, it's not here. It's like if you had this is still X and this is still Y because it's a box, but
you know that Y is 0, it's the 0 degrees, and X is 90 in this case.
let's say that again.
Well, I'm just saying is when on David's calculations, if you're when you start off, when you turn on the robot,
Yeah.
the going straight is the Y direction.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and if you turn right, it's a plus degree, and if it turns left, it's a negative
Minus,
degree.
Yeah. Anyway, so going through that, like I said, I figured out my, basically the number of ticks per millimeter, and like I said, it works out in his equations, but it doesn't work out on the for the robot moving. So I've got to figure out why that's different now. So
can you go back to your the screen that had your data?
yeah, I think it's
so.
Whoops.
Oh man.
Whoops. I saw it
Okay.
there. Okay, so what's the discrepancy? You're saying you're supposed to move 100, and you said you moved 106.
Yeah.
Where is it? Where's that line? That bottom line?
Yeah, right here. That should have been 100, but
you're 6 offset, aren't you?
Say that again.
I thought when you did your turn, you said you were -6 in one direction.
Yeah, right here.
Okay. So is that getting carried over?
It might.
Because 106, that would be, 106.
6 longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the Y direction. Yeah, that's a possibility. I didn't want to zero out the encoders, so I do a relative. I do a basically every time I read, there's I subtract it from the previous reading, and then I have like a delta, so I don't actually go out and reset kind of the global encoder count.
All right.
And that's where this may happen here. It's I started out about 6 off, and that may have been carried over.
Now the other thing too, and I'm trying to think of this through, and I'm sorry, it's been a while. When you rotate in place, if you want to stay in place, then your 3 points have to be on a grand circle.
Right.
So
you mean your caster and
yeah.
Yeah.
So is that true on your robot?
It should be. I actually kind of fiddled with the distance between so it should be. Yeah. I've got.
So you took that into account.
What can it be a little off? I mean, is it because the wheel kind of has to be twisted sideways?
I'm trying to figure it out in my own mind too, because I know it works, but I'm not sure why. Because if you're outside, you're obviously your tail end is going to swing around.
Right.
Okay. And it may be because when you swing it around, you move the other 2 wheels off of their rotation center point.
Could be.
And
and there's a little bit of slop in the,
well,
I don't know, maybe
I mean,
2 millimeters.
yeah, I mean, I had a lot of robots that didn't obey that rule, and they turned okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I mean,
yeah.
they might not have been able to sit there like he is and spin in a circle for an hour, but
Oh yeah.
but
And-
you know what I mean.
Yep. Anyway, so now I've got to figure out why it's not actually rotating the number of degrees that I asked it to, or moving forward where it was.
Well,
So it's gonna-
how do you know when just you targeted, say, 30 degrees? I think you said.
Yeah.
All right, so the align, is it like a boundary, like where it says, okay, if you're within 0.5, you're gonna stop?
It's basically this count here, angle count. That's the number of encoder ticks each wheel has to move, one forward and one backwards,
Yeah.
to achieve that angle. And there probably is a little bit of overshoot because
Yeah.
I don't want to go so slow that it ticks forever, but I don't want to go so fast that I have tons of overshoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just as long as the count is bigger. There's some granularity in that. If you look at it every period, or 50 milliseconds, in that 50 milliseconds, it could go over that number at the beginning of the interval. In which case you'd like to stop it exactly, when it goes over it. And
Yeah. It's like when you're shooting for a target, you're someplace you got to say, well, okay, I've reached my target.
yeah.
And there's, when I started off, what I would do is I would simply say, well, if the target where I am and the target value is less than half a centimeter or whatever, or half an inch, probably for me, I've achieved it.
Uh-huh.
But what'll happen with that is you'll always stop short.
Right.
You'll always stop short. And then, so I like the way that Ron, and I think Dave does it this way too. And that is, okay, so you say, well, okay, when I get within 2.5, inches from my target, I'll start looking at the distance and the previous distance. And then you keep going until the distance doesn't get smaller anymore. And that means you'll always be one cycle over the target.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm saying? I don't know of any way that you can, I guess you could offset your targets a little bit to get it right on 0.
Yeah.
Ray, where did you come up with the number 66? How do you know that's the right number of ticks to rotate to the angle that you want to rotate to?
Yeah, that's it's just let's see, what is it?
Because you're already calculating the angles here, right? You're calculating your theta, which is basically where your robot's pointed. So if you keep up with that, and I find it much easier to keep up with it I call it a heading, so I keep it up with it in degrees. So this is where I'm at, and then what's the angle to my target, and then that becomes the feed into your motor loop to say, okay, in order to achieve this angle, I need to start to rotate. And then as you do the calculations that you're already doing here, like your target angle, and all the calculations look right. Although I would suggest, instead of doing the 180 divided by pi, I would make that a constant because division is a lot of machine cycles, and it can also run into issues of losing resolution, right? Whether it's a float now or an integer. I use a constant there. I think it's 57 something, but that would be a suggestion I would make. But you know, if you're calculating where you're heading and you know where you want to be, then that's the error that you want to generate, because you're just saying, okay, rotate X number. So you're going to a position or some count, and not
Right.
necessarily a position, I guess you could say. So that may be, you know, I mean, even if you calculated it out, that still seems like there's a lot of error there, because you say, okay, if I have an absolute position when I start as 0, and now I'm going to keep up with where I'm at and where I want to be, then I know which way I need to turn and how far I got to go to get there.
Right.
So, you know, basically you just keep turning until you get there, and that's what Doug was saying. Is, you know, with David, and I do it the same way, where there's a dead zone there, because what'll happen is once you rotate and then you try to do something like, for instance, I rotate to a heading and then I take off to the heading. So it doesn't really matter if I'm perfectly aligned with the heading when I take off, because now my navigation routine is taking over, and it's going to keep me with a smaller tolerance, because like Doug was saying, you kind of, when you're rotating, you either kind of rotate real slow there at the end, or you have a lot of overshoot.
Yeah.
Right? So even if you overshoot, if you're going to take off to a heading, and again, you know where I'm at and where I need to be, then the error will take care of itself, because you would feed that into your turn mechanism, right? That I know I'm a little short of my target, so as I take off, I'm going to correct for that.
Right. Or your target distance and target angle should correct for it, even if you're not exactly where you hope to be. Yeah. I had a question about scaling. I know David, he limited his motor commands to plus or, well, I think plus or minus 100%, positive or negative, just to clip it. He's got to have some sort of scaling factor for to combine velocity and rotation, but he doesn't really say that, you know, what that is in his talk.
Well, there's a couple of different areas you have to keep track of, right? In other words, your PWM is going to have some finite value, right? And I think y'all were talking about the Arduino PWM a couple of weeks ago, and it was 0 to 255, right?
Mm-hmm.
So any error, anything you feed into it has to be scaled to that 0 or 2 to 255.
Right.
So it depends on, but your encoders may be, you know, out of scale from that. So basically what you do, and what David, I think, was saying with the 0 to 100, is that's a percentage, right?
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of my maximum PWM do I want to command? Do I want to say, this is how much PWM I want?
Right.
And then you let the math take over and say, okay, well, if I'm saying 90%, then I know that my PWM maximum is 255. And then if it's, you know, basically it's just math at that point.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I scale it. Everything's a percentage, other than the error. In other words, error is a quantitative. Well, there's really no quantity to it, because it's just a, you know, how far off of where I want to be that I am. And then that gets scaled into, you know, the maximum value of my PWM ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's see, what is it here? What is the coordinates? Actually, I don't think it does it in this one. There was another one where I use the I have like a fixed velocity, a fixed forward speed, and then I use the angle and I just call it a gain variable to basically steer the thing to the correct position. So in that point, I just kind of played around with the gain value, so that it responded enough to the angle, but not so much that it overshot and, hunted back and forth or oscillated.
Yeah.
Is that what you did for, to combine, velocity and rotation? You just kind of picked a scaling factor or gain factor?
When you say rotation, are you talking about like a turn value? Because, I only look at rotation when there's 0 forward velocity, right? No, you're rotating in place. Versus some heading correction that as you're moving along.
Okay.
So there's two different scenarios you have to think about. And that's why I feed that into and that's the thing about generating a dynamic error is you can feed that into a PWM loop or PID loop. And once you get the loop tuned, then those kind of overshoots and acceleration when the error is large and all those things that a PID gives you can all happen and help the behavior of your robot to make it turn nice and smoothly and then come to a stop. I think CanMan does that really well because it's the same thing. It's a PID that's controlling the steering.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the steering is just how fast I want to go forward and what's the error correction. In other words, I take a little bit off of one wheel and add a little bit to the other wheel to turn, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Well,
it seemed like
error number, whether it's positive or negative, tells me how much I need to apply to that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, David's looks like, he actually looked like knobs on his robot and he could change either the velocity or the rotation. And
I think he could control his motor control PID. I think you're right. He had little dials on there. I'm not.
Just to kind of demonstrate.
I have to agree with you. It probably did something with his PID loop, but I don't remember exactly what. But same kind of concept that you would, and really, I think I was mentioning that last week. Building the robot is just the first step. Tuning it is really the hard part. Getting it to really respond and behave and do everything you want it to do correctly and smoothly without tearing itself apart or falling over or falling apart, that's the real trick.
Yeah.
And that to me, in my experience, that's where all the time goes. I mean, that's where you really have to work on it and get it, it's all about testing, it's what they say in the world. So
yeah.
Hey, Ray, I just wanted to offer that in the API that my team uses, we have to normalize, or it normalizes all calls to motor power to a range of -1 to +1. And there are some caveats with that in that. So when there's different modes as well, and sometimes are you having problems hearing me, Ray, or others?
It's a little echoey, but I can understand you.
Okay. So it's a little bit renormal. So basically the API says it's -1 equals full reverse power to +1 is full forward, and it behaves a little differently depending on what mode you're in, right? So if there's basically one mode where it's basically doing raw fraction of battery output. right? So the available voltage will either be at 100% or minus 100% in that range. But then if you put it into a mode where it's doing its own internal PID control, then it's going to actually reserve, because now what you're actually, that range now represents a minimum speed and a maximum speed as opposed to plus minus voltage available, right? And so it actually, because it's doing PID on it, it reserves a little bit on the high end, so that if you're at your maximum speed, it can still increase the motors to do things like turning and things like that if it's just not quite, keeping up with where it's expected to be. So you have to sort of factor that in, but I kind of like the idea of it being all normalized to a specific range. You still have to come back out of that, and like Scott was saying, you still got to relate that back to the real world physics, right? So if you want to know what a particular speed in that range is, and that relates to how many feet per second or whatever your measurement is, you're still going to have to sort of profile that and create that translation if that's something that you want to achieve. But since you have the option of basically creating whatever middle layer you want, you might want to consider normalizing everything to one particular range, and then it becomes a little bit more portable when you switch from one hardware platform to another, right?
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so it's progress. Probably not enough for the contest, but some progress. I've, did things other ways. If with the LiDAR, I didn't, I could figure out where I was on the course and then, plot a course to the goal. And actually the LiDAR light worked much better than the Benawaki. The Benawaki was the thing that I've had on there, the longest, or the most recent. And I think the beam width on the LiDAR light is much smaller, and it's a laser versus an LED. It just seems to work better. I know the range on the LiDAR light was like 40 meters, and it would work outside. And the Benawaki was a lot less, but it also cost about a third what the LiDAR or the LiDAR light cost. Anyhow, so making some progress, but still got to figure out why it's now not moving to turning or moving to the angle or distance that I expected it to, even though it shows up in the math as it is, or as though it is.
There you go. Okay. Well, we wish you. Okay, so next in queue, I have a question. Then we have Kareem, and then open mic. So, and I'll just paste my question into the chat as well. But for anybody that's using Arduino extension from Microsoft with VS Code, I keep getting these nags when I open it up saying that VS Code will no longer support binding with the IDE, Arduino IDE, and that's how I've been running it for years. Instead, they're trying to get you to run to use VS Code with the Arduino CLI, where that kind of binding is built into the Arduino extension for VS Code. So anyhow, I started on that kind of half-baked way over the weekend, and it didn't work right out of the box. I'm sure I was probably hitting the wrong button or something, but the idea is, can anyone point me to some tutorials or background? I put some links in there that seem relevant, but I haven't tried to go through them just yet. So I'm just looking for how can I get the most out of the Arduino extension to VS Code when it's bound to the Arduino CLI instead of the IDE. Any takers? Any advice?
I'm just using Arduino 2.0 and
Okay.
all by itself without Any,
I'm using Platform IO.
Platform IO. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I was going to
My
say,
observation is that Microsoft gives you nice tools, but then they take them away. I'm glad Harold's not here.
All
I've
right.
been a Microsoft programmer my whole life, and it is so frustrating.
Yeah, they all seem to do that. Okay.
Carl, I use a product called Visual GDB, and it's a Visual Studio Visual Code plugin for cross compilation, and they got some nice libraries. It's not free, but I think the hobby version's like less than $100. But they have an Arduino module. I don't know what it's based on or what its hooks into are, but I've used it quite extensively in ARM development, and it's nice because it's seamless. All the debugging, step, variable watching, you get all of the great things about Visual Studios. But the debugger is wrapped into it. It's just like you're debugging code, C# code, right in Visual Studio. So
Okay.
that's kind of my language and platform of choice. So
Cool.
and I know I've seen the Arduino project option. So I haven't explored it, but
Okay. Well, I've been really pleased with how the VS Code works with the Arduino IDE. But it's actually extra setup to get that working, because you've got to manually hook up the links so that it knows where to find your, in my case, portable version of the Arduino IDE. The other one the Arduino CLI looks like it's nicely built in. If I read this thing right, it seems that as soon as you plug in an Arduino, if it's not already selected, it'll detect that and offer to change to the right board type. So I got to believe that if it works as advertised, it could be pretty nice. But somehow I'm missing the silly basic steps of how to turn it on and compile something. So maybe you have to hook a board up for it to work. I don't know, but there's some kind of initialization I figure I'm missing, and once I figure it out, I'll give a show, I suppose.
That's okay.
Carl, are you using the legacy IDE?
Yeah.
Or the 2.0?
Well, no, yeah. So I use portable. I think it's 1.8.8 because versions before and after break the Microsoft extension. So that's why I use a portable, and I just never updated, and it's been rock solid.
Well, I was just reading through that article, one of the GitHub from Microsoft you had posted, and it specifically mentions the legacy version of the IDE.
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't find a good, like, just walk through these steps to say hello world. Like, I can't seem to find that, which means have to figure it out ourselves. I mean, so okay, trial and error. But I'm kind of leaning this way because I'm helping some young kids, and free tools are always better for that.
Are you on Linux or Windows?
Windows.
Well, it's still free to use the command line integration, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it should be. But I mean, versus the Visual GDB that Scott mentioned, I mean, that sounds super cool. But and I can still set up the legacy IDE. I mean, it still works today, but at some point they're going to make that break.
Does Platform IO only work with like ESP32, or does it work with the classic boards? Because
it works with,
it works really well.
Yeah, that's what I've
It
heard
works
too.
with just about everything.
But it's a lot more to set up, if I remember Doug's training, or maybe I.
well, no, it's not really
It's
that
pretty
hard.
simple.
Yeah. One of the things that I have found, though, was, when we did that training, we tried to set it up for two ways. We said, okay, here you're going to use essentially Visual Studio, and all you're going to do is be using it as an editor for the Arduino environment. And we set that up first. And then we went back and we set it on Platform IO. And one of the problems that I found is that if you've got both of those setups on your Visual Studio, you do get, you keep getting little boxes that pop up saying, that I got something that's not supposed to be used with this one. But, I just punch through them and tell them to tell me later and just keep on going. So I don't see, if I were trying to get somebody who didn't know anything, I would probably set them up on Platform IO, and just make sure that they started with a fresh install, so they didn't have a whole bunch of, I've messed with it 3 years ago, and I messed with it last year, and I messed with it 2 months ago, and I got all sorts of crap in there, and I don't know what it is. I would just start with a completely fresh thing, and just, start off with the minimum to do Arduino and then probably Git, there's a lot of nice Git add-ins too, but you don't need all of them. You can do it with just one or two.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We all have our favorite subsets. So,
yeah.
Okay. So Platform IO, maybe I need to give one more look at that for the short term.
Yeah. No, the big thing is if you're in the Arduino environment and you're going to Platform IO, there's two things. One is that, everything is a main, you start off with main.cpp as opposed to INO file. And so that means you can't, with your Arduino, you could name your project like mybigrobot.ino, and that would be your equivalent to main.cpp. Yeah. So you can't you don't have that flexibility, but you can name the directory or the folder to your project. And then I guess the other thing is how you handle libraries. And I got to admit, I kind of don't like the way Platform IO works on that. Otherwise, it essentially allows you to add any library that they know about. Okay, so you'll still occasionally have to put a library in the library directory. But if you do that, and then if you're using their automatic way of loading it in, you have to look at the Platform IO, I don't know, .text or whatever it is, to see what you did, because those libraries aren't going to show up in your library folder. The library folder is supposed to be the folder you put things that they don't have, or your own self-created libraries. So I kind of like the way Arduino did it. Is if you used it, you put it in the library directory. That way, later on, when you opened up the project, everything that you used is all there where you can see it, as opposed to sort of somewhere, So, but you can do it that way too. There's nothing to keep you from like downloading the library and moving it over to the library directory. It just means that it won't be listed in the Platform IO.text or whatever it is. And it might not be it won't automatically update for you. But that if you're doing a project, you might not want everything updating on you. So it's just something, the way to think about it. You have to decide how you're going to handle it.
I've done that where I have some motor libraries that are specific to a board. So I used a library that was available, but changed the pinouts, and I moved it into just the local library folder. And that way it doesn't get updated, it's fixed at what I put on it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, as usual, more feedback than I bargained for, but that's great. Thanks. Okay, next we had maybe Kareem, if you're ready with the show. Otherwise, after that, we have open mic.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll leave it to you guys to indicate whether this is interesting or not, and I can like hurry it up or cut it short as we go. Otherwise, I could probably like talk for an hour on this. So, and I know we don't want to go that far, but I'm going to say that I'm a convert to the the current version of available AI tools. And I only really just started experimenting with it. So I put a link in there for my first interaction with ChatGPT, specifically around coding and robots and whether or not it would be useful for high school FTC teams. And I'm going to go ahead and present that, but let me go ahead and put in the link to the second article, which was using GPT-4, and it's a whole different experience. Okay, so they're both in there right now.
Okay. Hey, can we, when we put in links, if we can label what the link is, like this is,
okay.
because
I was relying on Carl to up on that
I
with
got you covered on
running
this one,
commentary. Yeah.
I got you covered on this one, but yeah.
Embellishments.
Okay. I'm going to actually show the actual pages, which I just posted up on the site.
Lazy Me gives two plus ones to what Doug said, but
okay, yeah. Let's see, where's the thing? There is a tab. Okay. Oh wait, this is the. Let's go back to the first entry. So this is just last week, and I'm going to try and go through here kind of fast, but basically I was just it's the end of the season for the team, and I needed to sort of see what I've seen, all of the hype around GPT-4 and what it can do for coding, and I've followed a lot of things, and I was thinking maybe it's time to really look at this in some depth. And I'm not saying that this is in depth, but this is a start.
3 hours.
So I'm start. Huh?
3 hours, it says.
It was a 3-hour conversation as I was sort of learning what to do.
Wow.
Yeah. The next one was faster because I've started to learn how to develop prompts and things like that. So here I'm just starting out with something really simple. So this is me, wherever it says user, and I'm just saying, telling ChatGPT, let's start building a list in HTML, right? Because I just wanted a simple unordered list to show to develop a list of like edge cases for the 6CAN competition. So this is just me sort of getting used to how GPT does it. So immediately it comes back with, these are the two kinds of lists that you can do in HTML. I haven't given any context at this point, right? So it gives me a whole bunch of empty values, or just, these are clearly edge cases of certain coding kind of situations. And then I start just one at a time telling it, let's edit this list, right? So here's can obstruct. It's interesting how it changed what I saw as can obstructs navigation to can obstruct navigation. And the funny thing here is that it was interpreting cans, because I didn't give any context. It was interpreting this as the verb, right?
Okay.
So
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's thinking of this as verbs, right? And that leads to some, cuteness further as we get further down. So I think here it still doesn't understand that's an object. And then as we get further down, all of a sudden I told it, like, the can here is a soda can. So we kept the verbs, right? But it added soda can, and it added it to all of the list items. So it figured that out. And then I just wanted to change it to, something more generic like Target. And so this is just me sort of using it as a secretary, somebody taking dictation for me to produce an output. So this actually took a lot longer than it would have been to just type it out, but I'm just learning the whole idea. And then I started giving a little bit more context, and so here I'm saying it's painted bright orange, and it's able to sort of keep up, and it's modifying its previous understanding. So it's doing okay. It's a simple ask of it, I guess, but and as a first experience, it feels like it's really sort of figuring out what I'm asking for. And so the next thing I wanted to try, this is a totally different thing. This is like, we want to see if it can help create a vision pipeline in OpenCV. All of a sudden, I'm getting much more specific, and it comes up with a pretty reasonable orange can detector class right out of the gate. Now, this is actually for desktop Java. I did specify Java because that's the environment that my team operates in. But from my experiments with OpenCV over the years, this seems like a very, very reasonable approach. It's chose to use erosion and dilation, whereas we would normally use something like blur to get rid of the jaggies in the image. But I've seen other pipelines use that approach, so it seems reasonable. Now, I didn't actually try compiling any of the code yet, so I don't know. One of the things you'll notice as we go through it seems very confident about its answers until you point out where it's wrong. Oh, by the way, I'm not looking at the screen, so I don't know if people are finding this interesting or not.
Very much so.
Huh? Yes?
I'm finding it interesting.
Okay.
You
cool.
got thumbs up? Keep going.
All right. I'm going to keep going. Okay.
I thought maybe you were going to compete with Taylor Swift for writing songs or something.
No, this is purely more. This is definitely more practical.
In the style of Taylor Swift.
In the style of, yeah, exactly.
There you go.
I wonder if we could write a soundtrack for this this class right here.
You might be able to, yeah, make it rhyme, no less.
Well, there's something kind of amazing coming up, so I'm just going to keep on going. Sure. So my purposes here isn't to truly evaluate whether this is useful or compilable even, but it seems like it's doing it's basically using a color blob detector, and it's using the normal contours that you would find in OpenCV to output the result. Whether things like this is appropriate or not, you could argue, but it seems to be doing the right thing. So, but it was desktop Java, so I asked it to rewrite the code so it works on an Android device because that's the environment that we're on. And lo and behold, it does it. I mean, this is an activity, which is this sort of the core construct for an app on Android. And again, because I've written and compiled and edited versions of this kind of thing in the past, this all looks approximately right to me. Again, I didn't try to actually compile it, but it's also got all of the on create and the on resume overrides, things that you've got to have for any kind of Android app. It's a very simple one, right? But then it stops right here. It was about to write another override and implement something else, and it looks like it has some sort of limit on the length of the prompts that it can supply. So I just ask it here, on how much text it can generate or something. Yeah. So I ask it to go ahead and continue, and then it came up with the sort of the next steps. And it's interesting how it started breaking this down into code fragments instead of a complete app being spit out. And it's actually explaining it. This is, and it all seems right on. Now, again, I wouldn't trust this until I actually ran it through a compiler and found out where the problems are. But I can say that this feels very much derived from a plethora of examples that are out there and searchable on the internet, right? So again, this is sort of where we run into that is this a copyright infringement kind of a thing? You know, exactly what sources, because this is starting to feel a little bit like it's
Somebody's
being pulled
words.
from very specific examples that somebody has published. And yet you can't really track that down.
No attribution.
Yeah, and there's no attribution. And I'm not sure. In fact, I'm almost 100% sure that that's not actually because of how these language models work. It is some sort of a synthesis of many different examples. And so I don't really believe it's pure copy paste kind of a thing from the examples it has. It does seem to understand. Every time I say understand, let's put quotes around it. You know, whatever understanding means to these things, it seems to add something deeper than just pure surface descriptions.
So its answers seem pretty concise.
The answers seem pretty good in many cases. I'll show some examples of where it gets a little bit awry coming up here. But yeah, here's like, what if it's lying on its side? You know, what's what are you going to do to identify a can that's lying on its side? And it comes up with sort of a bounding box. And did it do it the right way in this one? I don't remember. It's doing a bounding rect, bounding rect. No, so this is an orthogonal. So this is orthogonal to the camera, this kind of rectangle. So it wouldn't really do a great job because if a can's lying on its side, it can actually have a weird angle to the camera, right? So it's going to have these different aspect ratios.
But it seems like it even has relatively decent variable names, or like that one class name was.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because it came up with can orientation detector, right?
From the it decided
prompt.
on that just from my prompt. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm still at the point where I'm learning how to prompt it appropriately, give it the right amount of context for each question. At this point, I'm not too concerned about it because I'm using the free version of ChatGPT, which is based on GPT 3.5. And I think that there was a limit of like 100 responses every 4 hours or something like that. And I wasn't going to be consuming nearly that much. Because this is not a, I guess I would say that it's not that hard to use, but it's also not like an intellectually lazy kind of a thing that you got to do. You got to be thinking about these prompts. So I was learning a lot as I went through this. But yeah, I'm asking what's the actual aspect ratio, because it looked like some of the things that it had responded to were wrong. And then it actually like goes out and finds this information. So it had completely guessed incorrectly on the aspect ratio, but then when I ask it to ask any questions of it about a specific decision it's made, it'll go back through and it'll correct itself very readily.
Code that is copyrighted, I imagine you wouldn't have access to it unless you paid for it, right? I mean, anything in the public domain is, if you can see it, it's can't be copyrighted, right?
That is not true.
No?
You can publish books and code and things like that, and you can claim a copyright on it regardless of your intent to get remuneration off of it, right? Or whether it's behind a paywall or not. So as there's a lot of open source code that's copyrighted, right? And you just and typically the requirement there is that you give some sort of attribution for it at a minimum. But there's plenty of stuff that's free and yet still copyrighted.
Just check the different license types on GitHub. It's very interesting to read through them.
So there, and this is clearly one of those big areas that has to be resolved. This technology is so new and so breaking of previous norms that it's going to take a while for the legal system to catch up. And we were probably due for a copyright reevaluation of how copyrights work in this country and across the world for a long time, I would say. But this is going to shake things up even more and sort of force the issue.
I could swear there've already been some cases started of, is it in this or is it in the photo imagery generation, but where somebody sees an artist or creator sees something that they recognize that they've done, and I think some of those suits have started already.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that in the imagery generation. Here, it's a little bit harder to point to a specific source. But yeah, the litigation has commenced. Okay, let's see. So now I ask it to use the corrected aspect ratio, and it does it. And without going through it, it is a better aspect ratio. Let's see, what am I doing here? Oh, this is going back to where it's fallen over on its side. So this is, and you can see that now it's gone back to, see there's a main right here. It's gone back to examples for desktop Java instead of Android Studio. So the Android Studio environment sort of didn't stick in the conversation. Although I probably could have asked it to convert that example back over. Okay, so let's see. Here I'm giving a lot more information. The fact there's 6 cans, and we need to find their locations on the field with the can detector code. And this is it's suggesting the formula for getting the location on the field. And so I wanted to start visualizing this, right? And I wanted to see if it could generate an image. And this version of ChatGPT does not generate images, although there are versions of ChatGPT-4 that can. But since an SVG is code, you can ask it to generate an SVG of the field. And so I asked it to do that, and this is what it produced.
So random can locations?
These are random can locations. I don't think I even asked for them to be random at this point. I might have. I probably did. But yeah, it generated this image of the field, right? And this was supposed to be a border that it just painted incorrectly. So there was some more. I'm going to sort of go through these a little bit faster. Here's another one. I don't know where it came up with these colors. I don't know why it went from circles to squares. I asked it to correct that coming up, and it's back to circles again. But the cans are very, very large, right? This is the first time I asked it to generate the starting areas, and you can see they ended up these tiny little boxes down here and above. But they got them in the right place, right? I basically said the midline aligned with the top and the bottom of the field. So I keep going round and round. This is where I asked it to, fix their size, and it went to some, I have no idea why it's got this aspect ratio. And then I got, working with the prompts, I got it to sort of start to draw it a little bit better. It's aligned with the outside edge of this SVG, which is a border around the field, just to isolate it. So it lost its alignment, but this is sort of the closest I came using GPT 3.5. And the further I went, at this point, I'm delivering more and more constraints throughout the conversation. And one of the things you notice is it keeps regenerating from scratch, right? It doesn't really sort of use the previous version. And all of a sudden, our can locations aren't randomized anymore. The starting location is a little bit better. But yeah, the more I constrain this, the more off it becomes. And all of a sudden we get this diagonal pattern, and this is on the left side instead, starting areas. And then we get to this weird aspect ratio thing again. And I'm just now the cans are different sizes, right? And this is representing the origin. But yeah, the field is right, except it went with the wrong aspect ratio on the field, and now the cans are all sorts of different sizes, right? And this was funny. I mean, this looks like a little Dilbert character or something like that. But basically, this is the point at which I give up, right? It's like it was getting more and more frustrating. I wasn't making any positive progress at this point. Okay, we're
Is that
halfway
Maybe
how
through.
that's what his
conversations
goal
go with your
was, to
team?
frustrate you, you know.
I heard two different things at the same time and couldn't tell.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
So I was wondering, Kareem, which is easier to manage, your team or ChatGPT?
Oh, ChatGPT by a long shot.
Okay.
Really?
Well,
You would have said your team.
you know, it doesn't have any motivation other than to try to please you. It may
Okay.
not, you know, I wouldn't even say that's necessarily a motivation, but it, you know, in human terms, but that is what it's trying to do. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next one. And so for this one, sort of picking up where I left off, this one is using GPT-4. And the way you get access to GPT-4 is you pay for it. So ChatGPT gives you access to GPT 3.5. But if you pay $20 a month, you have the option of using the GPT-4 engine. I think the number of prompts you get is like, I think it's down to like 15 or 25 every 3 hours at the moment.
Wow.
And
Like
as I was using it over the last week, it seems to have slowed down a little bit. So I think a lot of people are hopping onto it rapidly. I can tell you that I am going to continue using it for the near term, and I'm going to be happy to pay that $20 a month.
Huh.
Absolutely.
So you think you're actually going to get something useful out of it? That doesn't seem like it at this point. That
I would say that it looked hopeful. Certainly for the code generation kind of stuff, even with the 3.5, like it was just, you know, I've never seen a computer being able to generate that kind of relevant, useful information. So even just as a research partner or a rubber duck, you know, that you want to explain what you're trying to do I can see this as a way to really sort of get sort of stimulate your workflow. Yeah. So.
Yeah, as far as useful goes,
Mm-hmm.
I was using that yesterday. I get on there, and I don't know if you know what a regular expression is.
Sure.
People are programmers, right? This kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I needed a regular. At one point, I needed a regular expression to determine if XML prologue was in the right place and the right thing. I asked for it, and out come this big old long thing. I got another time I used it. I need a regular expression to give me to validate a Windows path on the file system. And it went in, it caught all the stuff. We had to tweak it just a little bit, but it came out of there. So a regular expression is something that, you know, I use occasion. About 20 minutes after I get it to working, I forget how I got it to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe even quicker these days. But regardless, though, you know, I asked for that thing, and I was very specific what I was asking, and it was able to give me a regex that I could plug right in, and it did what it's supposed to do. It had little extra tweaks to it because I couldn't tell it exactly what I needed extra on it, but
Mm-hmm.
then a quick tweak and done. I mean, it turned an afternoon into 20 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, be careful about testing what it produces. But it's a great way to get started and probably even evolve what you're working on. Again, yes, this is a total of 2 longish sessions with it, and that's it. So, you know, it's kind of silly of me to come to really deep conclusions about it, but it seems very, very useful and hard to ignore going forward. So this is the beginning of the ChatGPT-4 session, and I'm going right back to generating SVG to see what it can do. My prompt is more, I guess, concise, has more of the context that I think it's going to need. So this is not a perfect comparison, but right off the bat, this is what it produces, the code, and this is the right aspect ratio. This is the field. This is correct, right? The cans maybe not the right size, and they're linear. There's a linear array here. So I asked for it to randomize starting positions. And this is interesting. I didn't actually produce the SVG because what it did is it assumed that this was a programming conversation, and that what I was asking, because I use words like playing field, right? And it's picking it up and even putting it in the comments, right? Starting zones, that's very, very helpful. But the fact that I use the word playing field, it kind of thought that I was developing a game and that I dynamically wanted to update the positions of these circles of the cans. And so it decided to offer placeholders, so variables, for where they would show, so that you could use some other scripting language to modify those locations, and it could, be the basis of some sort of game. And then I basically said I wanted to create a specific example, not a dynamic one. And it understood. It says it understands my. Now it'll often say something like this when it doesn't. So be careful again about what it's claiming. But here it is. They've randomized the positions, and I also added the constraint that the center of the can cannot be inside the starting zone. I don't even know if that's a rule. It's probably just a nicety. In fact, I don't think it is a rule.
Yeah.
But
we would never. It's an implied rule.
Right. It's an implied rule. Yeah. So I turned that into a real rule just by saying it that way.
Are the cans properly sized, or how did it know to just? I didn't see where you said anything about the can sizes.
I did call them soda cans.
Oh, okay.
Right. And yet it wasn't exactly right. So again, I'm not sure how it came up with that, because I actually, right here, I'm asking, why did you choose a specific radius? And that it should actually be a 15. So I had a typo in my prompt, but it was producing a can radius of 15 here, I think. Yeah. So I asked it. All I'm doing is asking it to justify, and then it goes into this. I apologize. I made an error. It looks it up. It calculates it. The other one had a lot of trouble. So basically, we're doing 3 steps of scaling, because we were going with basically we're going inches, and then it was correlating that with some definition of the width of the SVG, which is unitless. And so it was making some interesting decisions and switching up like the total number of units for the full width of the field, and adapting things over time. But depending on how you do the prompts, I was asking it for either 1 or 2 or 3 levels of scaling for it to calculate. And there were problems with 3.5, but version 4 was just doing it fine. But they did recorrect it. It looked up somewhere what the actual thing would be, right? And then it scales it to 18.2 units. So now they're a little bit bigger.
But you didn't even ask for it to make a new SVG.
Exactly. I didn't. It just corrected it. I didn't even ask it. I didn't even tell it you're wrong.
Right. No.
Right. I just said, why did you choose this particular radius? And even though I gave it the wrong radius, it went.
Oh, my bad. Well, I'm at it. Here's the redone.
Exactly. It's really quite amazing.
Wow.
So it's doing this stuff pretty well. And here I'm asking it, well, I didn't like the fact that actually I like the color scheme here, but I wanted them to be orange. And then I asked it to regenerate the random seed, so they'd be in different positions, because they were the same in the last 2. And lo and behold, there it is. It just does it. Right. And it hasn't made any of those mistakes that 3.5 was making in sort of regenerating the whole thing from scratch. If you look at the actual code as you go through, you can sort of see that it's taking that back in as input, and then just making the changes that are necessary. Or at least that's certainly how it feels. So this is interesting. At this point, I gave it the actual rules document.
Oh, God.
Right. Yeah, and I asked, right. And I didn't even ask it to create a summary. I was just trying to give it more context for the next step, which was going to code. Right. And here we go. Now, the funny thing is, it finds all of these different concepts really, really well. And yet it makes detailed mistakes in a whole bunch of them. In fact, I didn't even bother correcting all of them. Yeah. But there is a, like I say here, number 4 is correct. The cans must be no closer than 5 inches to the walls, and they're also outside the starting zones. So it goes in and it regenerates the prompt for item number 4, and it does that correctly. I think one of the ones I didn't tell it to fix was the wall height. So somewhere in here, right here. So it knows that there are playing field walls, but it calls them 4 inches high when it clearly says in that same sentence is what, 8 inches?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why does it do that? I don't get that. It's like, and yet it figured out that the walls are important. So I'll go ahead and go through and actually correct these items. I didn't actually tell it to regenerate the new understanding before I moved on, so I probably should have done that. But so here we're going on to, I'm telling it that we have a webcam on the robot that we're building, and we have OpenCV pipeline that can detect cans in the frame and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm asking, suggest a strategy for determining location of the field. Location of the cans, right, while the robot is rotating. So this is something we'd already started, writing, and it was just clearly we're just going to do a in-place scan of the field, and we already knew what the approach was going to be, but we wanted to see what ChatGPT would say. And I probably should have broken this down because it's more readable in the actual chat. It's being all munched together with the HTML here, but this is a real good strategy. I mean, this is basically the same strategy that we're having to scan in place and use it even suggested using k-means to resolve redundant can positions, because it seems to understand somehow that while you're rotating, you might catch the same can in multiple images. Yeah. And I didn't want to go down the k-means approach just because I'd never actually coded that before, and so I didn't know how to debug that kind of situation. So I wanted a simpler strategy, and boom, it comes up with a simpler strategy, right? And here all we're doing at this point is basically just throwing away subsequent detections if they happen to be close enough in position to the previously calculated position for the can. So it's basically a thresholding operation. Less effective, right? But it's still amazing. So I ask it, why don't you code that for me? Right? And boom. It's got a can detector, right? Here is rotating 1 degree at a time. I didn't give it any constraints about that. It's showing that you would need to capture a frame. You'd need to process the frame. So this is clearly boilerplate code, and yet, there's this, a way to, you're building up a list of detected cans, and then you're going through them to determine if all of them are unique, and basically scrubbing them if they're not.
I mean,
right?
It looks pretty clean, right? It's not a jumbled mess.
No, it's not a jumbled mess. It's actually a very good starting condition. And then it tells me what it's doing, right? It describes it really, really well. Again, I don't know for sure that this is actually right, but it looks right to me, right? Just based on my history. So here I'm adding that it can only move 1 can at a time. Basically some more stuff. I'm showing that there's the size of the robot. And then I'm basically pointing out that there could be cans that are in the way, right? And so, how can I navigate a path? And it recommends the A-star algorithm, right? And again, this all looks pretty much right? So now I'm asking you to update the SVG to add the round robot and the field divided up into cells, because it was originally recommending cells the size of the robot for the A-star division. And so it redraws it with the cells. And so here's where I expected to break it, and I did. Can you add the path that the robot would take following the A-star algorithm to this SVG? And basically it just basically stalls right here, right? And I point out that it's incomplete. It comes back and says, okay, I'll complete it. It seemed to get a little bit further, but it did not complete it. So it just timed out. Right. But imagine what it would have to do to be able to actually complete this, right? It would have to be able to generate some code on the side for the actual implementation, full implementation of the A-star, and run it through the example, positions that we have here in order to generate. I wouldn't expect a human to be able to do that without taking, a multi-hour separate break just to code it up and run it through an example. Let's see. Then I suggested it should be that the grid size that it came up with here is too big, right? The cans are never larger than, they're enclosing rectangle. And I suggested that maybe it should be the size of a can. And then it started coming back with a 2 by 2.5 by 2.5 inch rectangles. I wanted them to be a little bit larger, so I stopped it and told it to generate, 3 inches, right? And this is actually interesting in itself. At this point, it's a much denser grid, right? There would be many, many more lines of code. Yeah. And so it basically just said, I only included a few lines of the code for brevity to complete the grid, right? And then it gives instructions in this. There's a comment right in here about, completing the grid. So that was interesting also.
Got a little lazy.
Yeah, it got a little lazy. And again, maybe it's aware of the limit of how long its responses can be. And so that's why I did it. And I could have compartmentalized it a bit more and asked it to generate just different sections. And then I ask it, can you write an A-star algorithm in Java? Right? Boom. It does it. That probably took it, 30 seconds to generate all this text, and it failed again, right? At this point, it didn't complete this particular thing. There's probably some other functions that are missing. So it basically timed out, and I timed out as well. So this is the end of my second session. It was just like it was bedtime kind of a thing. So that's my first two experiences with ChatGPT for robots. So.
Whoa.
So I found that super interesting, and I decided that I'm gonna, at this point forward, my coders are going to start experimenting with this stuff over the summer, and I'm betting that a lot of teams by the fall will be using this as a standard tool set.
Mm.
Well, that's going to raise the bar for beginning teams.
Yeah, I think it'll have a. I think when so I think students are using ChatGPT already. The standard complaint is that they're using it for cheating on homework. And I can see how they might get too reliant on it and not be able to do tests well when they don't have access to it and things like that. And it's being a problem for teachers to assess, especially. Yeah, exactly. It's the same. It's not that different of a problem. It's just this thing is on steroids, and I don't think kids are going to be able to avoid using it going forward. And I don't think adults can afford to either. If you are a knowledge worker in any way, shape, or form, this is impossible to ignore.
So,
really
good.
Go ahead.
Conversation. One quick comment. I played with it a little bit myself, and I noticed that on ChatGPT 3, there's a 4K limit on the question plus the answer. That's why you got that one that didn't finish. And that may not be true on ChatGPT 4. I've never used it, and I didn't see you get to that limit on your.
No. I hit limits on 4 as well.
Yeah, but he's paying for it, so I assume that limit's probably going to be a lot larger.
It didn't seem like it was that much larger. In terms of the size of the response, it seemed like it was the same limit there, and that might be the fact that this is the GPT modeled through ChatGPT, right? Which adds some extra security and politeness constraints around it, that kind of stuff. And I think that limitation is probably the same for regardless of which model you're using. But when you start out a conversation and you're using the paid version, you can choose. It'll still default to 3.5, but there's a little dialog box at the very top of the session where you can choose ChatGPT 4, and the experience was quite different.
I was very interested to see that you followed up on conversation. When I tried it, it always seemed like it forgot the prior question and started over again. But you would say, "Oh, well, I fix this one little thing," and it would come up with that same stuff again. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it was able to do that on both of them for me, but it did it much better on GPT-4.
Yeah, to your point about cheating on tests and all that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've already had some discussion because improving, one of the things, what do? We recruit people.
Yep.
You know, and we've already sent out a company. Well, the way the recruitment works and that kind of stuff is now across all of our enterprises. It was used to be if you were in the Dallas Enterprise would recruit for the Dallas Enterprise, but that's not what we're doing anymore. So we've got, like, I don't know, we just acquired somebody. Some of you may or may not have received mail about that. Jump Analytics out of Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a enterprise or a company wide set of folks that are now doing recruiting. So you may get a call from a recruiter from Ohio or Austin or wherever we're at, right? And so we sent a thing out there and said, listen, we have this ChatGPT thing. Here's what it can do. If your candidates are declining an in-person, on-premise interview, I would hold it suspect of this, because they could easily be doing that on a Zoom call, doing something else, looking at the answers. In fact, I was listening to one of our, they were doing a technical interview, and I was listening to talk about Angular. And after the interview was done, I called Skylar over and I said, Skylar, how'd that interview go? He said it didn't really go really well for that person. I said, well, I overheard one of your questions. I typed into ChatGPT. Here's its answer. Skylar went, I'm hiring that person. Not even, I mean, it was as fast as he could read it, done deal. It was a correct answer. It was all it was supposed to be for what it needed. And it's like, so, man, that's scary, because I would hire that person. This person that on the phone right now with all the other junk, if they gave me that answer for that one question, I'd probably recommend them.
So my answer to that is that, you know, let's say that I'm like sitting down for that interview. I would demand to be able to use ChatGPT in the interview, right? In the actual test, right? I understand how those like on-premise tests work, and I think that they're testing the wrong thing now. I think everything's changed, and it's going to be more like it's not going to be how well can you actually answer this particular question about this technical aspect of this API to show your knowledge of it. It's show me how you're thinking and how you're using tools like ChatGPT to come up with the answer, or and even beyond the specific answer, what's the next strategy, right? I think it's going to become. I think you're going to be paid more based on how well you use tools like this than your underlying fundamental knowledge within just a few years, probably.
I had that very discussion this afternoon with one of my coworkers. Also, by the way, when Google first hit back in the aughts, back in the 99 aughts kind of thing, we figured,
same kind of thing, yeah.
Yep, same exact kind of thing, and we figured you could get a $10,000 pay raise just by knowing what Google was and how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a real deal, you know.
And it became an indispensable tool that you don't even think about for everybody, and this is just the next level of that.
It's pretty much water now, right?
But there's something more going on here. So you know, I'm not going to invoke magic or anything like that, or true general intelligence or anything like that. But there's something that happened. It's even detectable between 3.5 and 4.0, where the main difference was just the number of parameters that they ingested. So who knows what GPT 5, 6, 7 are going to do?
Yeah, there's a YouTuber out there named by the name of Nick Choppas that a lot of us follow. Really sharp guy, does lots of great videos. I don't know how he does all the video he does. Lots of great videos with performance and C# and the whole works. And he got on there with GPT-4 about a month and a half ago. Probably a little earlier than that because he got early access.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Look at this. I have Chat GPT-4. I ask it several things. It's writing senior dev level code." And if you go look at Nick Choppas on YouTube, you'll find him. And it's one of his. You know, he puts out tons of videos. So I can't say it's his one of the last couple because he puts out 2 or 3 a week, it seems. And he's very critical of a lot of things. And I said, "Well, what about this?" And they go, "Oh, you'd want to do this." And he's just literally writing senior dev level type code from what he asked it to do. Obviously, he didn't do everything, but for what he asked, it was doing exactly what he would do if he was coding it.
So how do we get it to say ingest Ray Kassler's code and debug the odometry in the style of David Anderson's presentation?
You want to try that? It's like I could try doing that live if Ray has his stuff available on GitHub or something like that.
It sounds fun.
David Sanderson's pseudocode is available online.
Yeah, even though it's like well-published code, I think that's a little bit narrow, right? This OpenCV stuff, I was kind of amazed that it was able to sort of translate it into specifically Java and then Java on Android. That, you know, it actually looked right. And I know that the number of the examples that are out there are, you know, dwindling in both of those cases because you don't do a lot of OpenCV with Java, and it's even more rare to do it with Java on Android. And yet it had enough of a resource base where it could, you know, generate reasonable answers. But if we went specifically to David Anderson, I don't. Who knows? We might be surprised.
One thing I was surprised about when I was trying it is that you could say, write this code in this language, and it would. And you could say, what websites have examples of that? And it wouldn't tell you. It's clearly looked it up, like you say, in its language model. It's looked through all this stuff. And it's found all this stuff, but it won't tell you where it found it from.
Well, again, I think it's partly a synthesis, right? So it's not like it's one specific example that'll return. It's some sort of amalgamation of multiple examples, and it probably intentionally doesn't even maintain the original resource, just so that they can say that they're not like. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Still a very good talk, and it is a very interesting thing to play with.
Yeah, we're looking forward to your next hour on that topic, Kareem.
Yeah, sorry I took up so much time.
No, you don't.
That was a lot more than I
expected. Awesome.
You're on the bleeding edge, Kareem. So
Yeah, I've been thinking about using it for marketing stuff and blogs, but yeah, or images too. But it's all time, right? Because at the end of the day, you still have to sit down and figure out how to drive it.
No, that's true. But you know, it's like this may have been built for programmers, so you know, you've got some coding experience. It was built by programmers, and it's like I didn't find it that difficult to learn how to generate useful prompts for it.
Well, I guess if you're a good communicator and you can interact well with humans, you'll probably do pretty good with this then, huh?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know if it was more about how well I communicate with humans, because there's some doubts about that, but it was. But you know, it just. I think it needs a little bit of consistency in the language that you give it, and it does seem like context matters quite a bit to the quality of its responses. So maybe thinking up what is missing from that context is something that you've got to learn to develop a bit.
Kareem,
Yeah.
you know, when you went to 4, you actually did a much more detailed description of the problem. If you went back to 3 and gave it that same description, how would it do? Do you know? I mean, I guess you.
I'm sure it would do better. I'll tell you what. Let's find out.
Excellent.
All right. If you got time for it, I can
Do
go
it.
ahead and pull it up right now. So okay. So,
Remember to share your screen.
right. Okay, so this is the last chat session. Where's my cursor? Oh, it's very narrow edge. Page up, maybe? No. Here's the biggest problem is you get this long, I think I'm trying to drag the thing up and it looks like, I just have to scroll. It looks like the projection window from Meet was interfering with me selecting it, but okay. So here's the prompt for the field, right? The very first one that I did in version 4. And then I'm going to go with a new chat. And this time it's going to default to GPT 3.5. I'm going to paste that in and we'll see what it comes up with. The same thing, I am not a language model, but I can do, oh, it's not coming up with SVG right away. Why is it stalling? I've never seen a stall that early in the process.
Huh. Well, it is evening. Maybe this is a really busy time for
there it goes. Yeah, maybe.
$700,000 a day servers.
So this time it refused to generate the SVG. That's interesting. I never had that problem before. I do not have the ability to create SVG images.
Well, but it offered to give you the SVG code last time, right? Yeah.
The SVG code.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so if we go from that and just paste it into, oh, you probably can't see this tab because I'm doing, let me, oof, that's horrible. Let me switch over to the other tab so you can see what it generated, or I'm just visualizing it. Up, restart a tab and go to this one. And that's what it generated. SVG 3.5, exact same description.
Wow. Not so
Which
good.
is not clearly not so good. Yeah. So there's definitely a qualitative difference between working with the two engines.
Huh.
Okay.
That's cool.
That's all I had.
That's a lot. I feel so much more informed.
Thank you very much for that, Kareem.
You're welcome. It was fun sharing it.
That's worth some kind of star. Virtual star? I don't know.
Maybe Carl will ask ChatGPT his question he started off with earlier with the Visual Studio Code and all that.
Maybe I should.
You could ask it to generate a star for Kareem. How's that?
The style of Dolly. Well, that's cool. All right, I can't wait to see where that goes. Okay, that's all we had in queue. Now that leaves it to open mic. So with that as a warm-up act,
Yeah.
Let's get into something complex now.
yeah, how about
Now for something really complex. Hey, Doug, I had a question about, I think, somebody said that you had like a corrected version of David Anderson's presentation, that there were a couple mistakes in it. And...
I don't ever recall getting that.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
Would I be able to share that? Do you think David would be okay?
Sure, I think.
I think his intention was for it to be shared, and people
Yeah.
make mistakes.
Yeah, I don't. It's not that I just don't remember getting a corrected version. You know.
Okay.
I thought he gave it to you, but
let's see. Ray, I know I won't be able to find it on the spur.
Okay.
You know.
okay.
I'm
going through my stuff here.
Yeah, I can. If he emailed it to me, I might be able to find the link, and that if that were possible, I'll go look at my email for Dave and see what I find.
Doug, you have an update to share. Look at this steam.
I actually drilled holes in
the box
and started putting things in it. I'm making movement, but nothing does anything yet.
Got some pretty heavy-duty hardware there. You have bearing blocks and.
So that I've got like my 18 volts in my ground, and this is my 5.2 volt thing. And this is my 9-volt thing for the Arduino. So I've got my power board set, and it'll go in here. And then I've started putting in what I was showing a minute ago inside the box is one of the axles that's attached to the little pulley thing that will move the legs up and down. I'm starting to work on the inside. I've been really busy working on some other stuff, so I didn't get as far along today as I thought I would. But maybe by next week I'll have something that actually runs under code and does at least moves the leg or something. Making progress. That's it. Thought I'd fill the moment while people were looking at their code.
Hey, Ray?
Yeah.
I just posted the file to the list server.
Okay, the list server. So that's on the
DPRG list server for
the D list, right?
You should get it in email if
you
it's
should get
working
an
for you.
email or open your inbox.
Okay. I have it open now, but I'll take a look.
Doesn't come that fast for me.
Oh, no.
And I don't get it in all my accounts anymore.
And there may be a size restriction. Certain Doug might have to approve it.
Okay.
Sometimes the moderator has to jump in.
Let me see if I can just email it to you, Ray.
Okay, that'd be great.
Let me see what I can find.
Yeah, nothing's showing up in email. No.
So I was looking for your email on the list, but I can't find it on the website.
Oh, I can just give it to you.
Yeah. Make Carl, can you take it out of the list after? Can you paste it in there and then just get Carl to pull it out?
Okay. Well, I can just tell you what it is. It's raykessler@hotmail.com, all lowercase.
That works.
No dots, no spaces, no underscores.
It should have come through now. I just approved it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's through, I think.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Attachments, revise your presentation. Okay.
I never got a your message to DPRG list awaits moderator approval before.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I got it too. Thank you.
Okay, you've got it?
I approved it.
I will delete
Hey, Pat, it won't actually come back to you through the list. It doesn't resend it to the original sender.
Yeah, I've noticed that before.
Let's see.
Yeah, it was posted to the list before, so I'll post it back to the list, and then there's no question about it's not released in the wild.
Well, if it was posted before, there is an archive available, so should be able to find it there if we know what to look for.
Yeah, well, I'll have to look back on the website and see if his presentation, if we had it in the new, if it was an event, then we should be able to just attach it to that.
I think it was June of 2021.
2021?
Well,
June 18th, maybe?
was it?
Okay.
2021. Yeah.
I had a date in August, but I think that's when I noticed there was an issue, and I asked him specifically about it.
Well, I saw from his title slide, I downloaded it the link was in the, and anyhow, his title slide had like June presentation, but yeah, here's the PDF that someone had earlier in the night.
Yeah, there's a slide deck. Yeah.
And it was from June presentation with the update 19th of August.
Okay.
That would be it then.
It says on the title slide. So there's the link right there.
Okay, so he's got it posted to the web.
Yep.
I refer to it a lot because.
Oh yeah, updated 8/23/21. Okay.
106 pages of goodness.
Oh yeah.
Definitely a good read for building robots.
Yeah, a little long, 3 hours and 19 minutes, but or to watch it.
What? I mean, there it is. You could ask ChatGPT to ingest it, and then.
Oh yeah.
The ingestion part happens really fast. It took less time for it. It ingested within seconds.
Wow.
Within a second, I would say, and then started generating output. It took much longer for it to generate the output, the summary.
Design a robot in the style of David Anderson, capable to beat Scott.
GPT-6 might be able to do that.
Skynet.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So where are we now that we're humbling ourselves with all this?
Somebody put a link to the DPRG archive, the listserv archive.
Let's see if we can find it. Historical old mail list archives.
There it is.
Okay, yeah.
We're saying it was in June, July.
Well, the presentation was June, somewhere in June, I think. Well,
2021.
Well, but that would have been the presentation, not the.
Not the actual sharing it on the list.
Yeah. But, June 12th. There, it's easy, because somebody set up the on-site search.
Okay.
Pretty
All
well.
right. Yeah, if I just went and looked at our webpage. If you go back in history on the news stuff, when you get to his presentation, which is called it's on
June 7th.
his is marked on his June, but we have it actually. It was given on May 12th, and there's a note in there in red that says, David found an error on his original slide deck. The link below is his revised slide deck. The video has not been re-edited. 8/23/21. So we do have that slide deck on the website. If you go to the talk.
Yeah.
Oh, this is very interesting. I actually tried to get it to ingest the thing, and it's now telling me that it cannot do that. I don't have the ability to access internet links.
Oh, but
Yeah.
it did it.
It did it last week.
Was it still on GPT-4?
Yeah, I put it back on GPT-4.
Huh.
The robots are rebelling.
Giveth and taketh away.
They were both PDFs, although this one has a lot more images in it. Maybe that's why. I don't know.
Could be a size thing. Remember, it's limited to 4K for input plus output.
Yeah, could be.
Well, that's just resource limitations, right? So imagine if you own the technology and you don't have those constraints. Imagine what you could do with this, right?
Yeah, the in-house guys at ChatGPT have a lot of fun.
Man.
Yeah, I think David had on his YouTube link off of his website, he's got that note as well. David found an error in the original slide deck. Link to the revised slide deck can be found at blah, blah, blah. And it's updated 8/23.
See you, Pat. On Saturday, we'll fire it up for you. Oh, he's gone.
Okay.
Well, so where are we, guys? Are there any other topics for tonight, or
Not for me.
I'm done.
I just want to know, how can I get ChatGPT to do my day job so I can sit in the backyard all day? Okay. Well, with that, I would move that we adjourn. Get a good night's rest, and hopefully see you all on Saturday. And
Saturday.
Saturday is a robot.